Urban legends always start the same way. Some things passed around campfires, whispered in schoolyards, or buried in forgotten forums. Stories parents tell their kids to keep them safe. And everybody swears that it's just a ghost story and that it's fake, until it isn't. Because sometimes the line between legend and evidence is thinner than we want to believe. And in this video, we're looking at 5 different urban legends that crawled out of the campfire and into reality. Stories that made even the skeptics stop and wonder, is this really true?
It's only a story. It's not real.
So turn the lights down and don't look away. Let's start with the one from New York that people still whisper about. Back in the 1970s, Staten Island felt like the quiet corner of New York City. Little neighborhoods, marshy woods, kids playing outside until the streetlights came on. And like any other town with kids, it's had its one creepy story. Don't go near the woods or Cropsey will get you. He was the local boogeyman, an escaped mental patient with a hook for a hand living amongst the abandoned Willowbrook State School. If you were playing too close to his land, he'd capture you and drag you underground. And you would never be seen again. But of course, it was just a story, right? Teenagers scaring kids, parents keeping them out of the woods. Everyone knew it was nonsense. But not before long, kids actually started vanishing. First, it was a little girl on her way home from camp, and then another walking near the woods. Police combed through the brush but found nothing. And every time someone went missing, people whispered that name again, Cropsey. At first, nobody connected the legend to the real world, until detectives followed a trail that led straight to the ruins of Willowbrook. Now, Willowbrook wasn't just in any old building, it was once a massive state-run institution for children with developmental disabilities. A place that by the 1960s had become infamous for its conditions: overcrowded, understaffed, children left there starving, lying in their own waste. In 1972, a young reporter named Geraldo Rivera, if you know you know, went undercover with a camera crew and exposed what was happening inside.
The doctor invited me to see the conditions he was talking about, so unannounced and unexpected by the school administration, we toured building number 6. The doctor had warned me that it would be bad. It was horrible.
The footage was very unsettling. Hundreds of kids crammed shoulder to shoulder in dark rooms. It made national news. Parents were outraged. And the state shut Willowbrook down not long after. But for years afterwards, the locals said that that place, the surrounding area, still felt wrong. Teenagers would sneak in at night for dares with their flashlights shaking in the dark. They'd tell stories about hearing whispers down the halls or footsteps echoing when no one else was there. And they all swore the same thing: this is where Cropsey lived. But as more kids kept disappearing, one detective went out to Willowbrook and they found what they pretended didn't exist. Makeshift camps, old clothing, mattresses, children's toys, signs that someone was living down there, and it wasn't just someone, it was a man. And his name was Andre Rand. He once worked as a janitor at Willowbrook before it shut down, and after that, he never really left. He camped in the surrounding woods, surviving off of scraps and whatever he could steal, and locals said that he would talk to kids, lure them away with candy, and then those kids would vanish. Now, Rand was arrested in 1987 after investigators found evidence tying him to several child disappearances, the same ones that people blamed on Cropsey. And when the case broke, the parents realized that this bedtime monster that they'd invent to scare their kids safe was based on a real man who'd been living amongst them. So was Cropsey ever real? Yeah, his name was Andre Rand. And he proved that sometimes we don't invent monsters, we just give them a nickname. And Staten Island never forgot his. So now let's travel a few hundred miles south of Staten Island, where Virginia was about to get its own monster. And before it was a legend, it was just a bridge. Locals called it Colchester Overpass, but later they would give it a new name, the Bunnyman Bridge. And as silly as it sounds, people around the DC area spent decades talking about a man in a bunny suit. If you were to drive out past Fairfax Station late at night, way past that last stoplight, and park under the old railroad bridge, you'll find what's left of Bunnyman Bridge. They say he only comes out after midnight, and you'll know when he's close because your headlights will start to flicker and you'll hear scraping on the metal above you. Back in the day, there was an asylum out here. The story goes that a bus full of inmates crashed during a transfer to Lorton Prison. Everyone died except for one man. When police finally searched the woods, they found the bodies of the missing inmates hanging from the trees, each one of them with their throats cut and a chunk of flesh missing. And besides them was a trail of fur, white rabbit fur. And that's when they started calling him the Bunny Man. He moved into the woods near the bridge and waited. If you parked your car there at night, he'd watch you from the tree line, and if you got out, if you said his name 3 times or laughed, he'd rush you, slice you open, and hang your body from the overpass with his hatchet still in your chest. Kids used to dare each other to go down there on Halloween, and the rule was, turn off your engine, count to 10, and don't make a sound. If you heard footsteps on the roof, that meant your time was up and he'd pick you. If you saw bunny ears in the reflection of your windshield, it was already too late. They say he still roams those woods, fur stained red, carrying an old hatchet, and if you're there when the clock hits midnight, you'll hear him whisper first, "You're on private property." And the last thing you'll see is those long white ears. It's a good story, the kind that spreads through schools and campouts, changing a little bit every time it's told. But here's the thing, it didn't start out as a legend, it started out as a police report. It's October 19th, 1970. Air Force Cadet Robert Bennett and his fiancée are parked on a quiet stretch of Guinea Road in Fairfax County, one of those unofficial lovers' lanes. It's quiet, it's late, and nobody's around. All you hear is the faint sound of the car engine and some radio love songs. Then there's movement. Out of the dark steps a man in a white suit with long bunny ears. He yells,
"You're on private property! I got your tag number!"
A hatchet explodes through the passenger window, showering glass onto their laps. The man gets closer and yelling louder,
"You're on private property!"
So Bennett slams the car into drive and peels off, his heart hammering, tires spitting gravel into the night. They don't stop until they reach his uncle's house nearby to alert the police, and that's when they notice it. That hatchet is lying on the floor of their car. Police arrive minutes later, collect the weapon, and log it as evidence. And that story runs in the Washington Post a few days later. Suddenly, the Bunny Man is on the record. 2 weeks later, another sighting. This time, a security guard watches a man in a furry rabbit suit step onto the porch of a new unoccupied house, and he begins chopping the support post with an axe, and he's yelling, "You're on private property! You're trespassing!" The guard moves to grab his sidearm, but then the Bunny Man bolts into the woods. It's the same road, the same neighborhood, and same message. You're on private property. So police take this seriously. Multiple officers respond, and an investigator canvasses the nearby construction office and gets a strange follow-up. It's a call from someone identifying himself as the Axeman, complaining that the developers are dumping stumps and brush on his property, and he's demanding a meeting, so a stakeout was set. But nobody shows up. There was no bunny and there was no meeting. And over the next few weeks and months, leads start trickling in. A local mom says her kid knows the Bunny Man. So cops interview this boy, and he's only 8 years old, and of course, he's just heard it at school. More kids come forward, and it's the same thing, just stories or whispers, and there's no hard facts. But March 1971, after months of legwork, the investigator writes a pretty blunt summary. After a very extensive investigation, it's unsubstantiated whether a white rabbit exists. So this case is inactive. And that should have been the end of it, right? 2 strange sightings, 1 police report, the case is closed. But legends have a way of growing even after the ink dries. As the years passed, the story twisted. Hatchets became murders, and one man with an axe became an escaped asylum killer who hung his victims from the bridge. It was all fiction, but it stuck, because a man in a bunny suit was real, and that hatchet was real, and the fear was also real. And that was enough. No one was ever caught, there was no motive, just reports and a legend that refused to die. Every Halloween, cars still crawl out to that bridge, their engines off, their windows cracked, and some say they hear footsteps. Others swear they see long white ears in the dark. I mean, it makes a great urban legend, right? But if a man in a rabbit suit can be real, wait till you meet the man who died and then came back. You know the word zombie, right? Hollywood made it famous, the undead, brain-eating kind. But in Haiti, the story is a lot older and a lot scarier. Long before movies turned them into monsters, the Haitian people spoke of the zombie, not as a corpse that comes back to life, but as a person who was stripped of their soul. someone who walks, breathes, and eats, but whose will has been stolen. According to legend, a boker, a dark sorcerer, could use a ritual powder to make someone appear dead. Their heartbeat slows, their breathing stops, and even the doctor would say that they've passed. And then at night, the boker digs them up, and the person wakes inside their coffin, half alive, half dead, and their mind fogged, their voice gone. And from that moment on, they served the boker, a living slave in a walking shell. The villagers called them the Walking Dead, but not because they were monsters, because they were victims. The greatest fear in Haitian folklore wasn't dying, it was being turned into a zombie. Parents told their children never to cross a boker, never to offend one because he could steal your life and keep your body. And for generations, that warning worked, until one day, a story came along that changed everything. Because in 1962, a man in Haiti really did die. He was pronounced dead by doctors, buried by his family, and mourned for nearly 2 decades. And then, 18 years later, he came back. A man named Clairvius Narcisse arrived at the Albert Schweitzer Hospital in a town of Deschapelles, Haiti. He was feverish, barely breathing, and terrified. Doctors recorded his symptoms. There was high fever, body pain, labored pulse, and within days, his condition worsened. And then he flatlined. 2 physicians signed the death certificate and his family buried him in the village cemetery. It was official. Clairvius Narcisse was dead. But 18 years later, 18 years, a man walked into his sister's village and said, "Don't you recognize me?" She didn't, until he started using childhood nicknames only her brother knew. Her knees gave out because this was her brother, Clairvius Narcisse, the man that they had thought was buried. He told her he remembered everything, the hospital, the paralysis, the people declaring him dead. He could hear his own funeral, and then after darkness, he woke up in a field surrounded by strangers, other dead people, working under the whip of a man they called a boker, a voodoo sorcerer. For years, he said he labored in silence until the boker died and that spell broke. He wandered the countryside until he found his way home. Now, to locals, this was proof. The zombie was real. To scientists, it was impossible, until one ethnobotanist named Wade Davis decided to go and find out. Davis spent years in Haiti and discovered something wild. Some bokers used a powder made from ground-up pufferfish, toads, and plants that contained a tetrodotoxin, that same toxin that causes death-like paralysis. Too much would kill you, but a small, precise dose, well, it can slow your heart rate and breathing to almost 0. Someone could be declared dead, even buried alive, only to wake up days later under the control of whoever dug them up. That's exactly what Clairvius described, a medical explanation for an urban legend that terrified a whole culture. He wasn't the undead, he was a victim of pharmacology used as witchcraft. Even so, science doesn't kill the story, it just makes it creepier. Because if a man can be poisoned, buried, enslaved, and returned to the world with his mind shattered, what would you call him? Some would call him a survivor, but Haitians called him zombie. Clairvius lived quietly until 1994, never far from the rumors that made him famous, and the old people in his village still whispered he died once, then he came back. Wrong. Every legend starts somewhere. Sometimes it's a campfire, sometimes it's a lab. And we've met the Boogeyman, we've met the Bunny Man, and now we've met a man who died twice. But our next legend, it's about a woman who had a smile from ear to ear. Every country has its ghost stories, right? But in Japan, one of the most terrifying begins with a simple question.
私くらい?
Am I pretty? If a woman in a mask ever asks you that, run. Because you might have just met Kochisake Onna, the Slit-Mouthed Woman. According to the legend, she was once beautiful, maybe too beautiful. Some say she was the wife of a jealous samurai who discovered her affairs and, in a rage, slit her mouth from ear to ear. Others say it was a jealous sister or a botched cosmetic surgery. No one agrees exactly on how it happened, only that she did die, mutilated, and her beauty was stolen in the cruelest way imaginable. But she didn't stay dead. She returned as an onryo, a vengeful spirit drifting through quiet streets at night, and her face was hidden behind a surgical mask. In one hand, she carried a pair of scissors, or sometimes a knife. She would stop strangers, she would lean in close and ask,
私くらい?
If you say no, she kills you instantly. If you say yes, she lowers the mask and reveals her mouth, carved wide open, the corners slashed to her ears. And then she'll ask you again, "Am I pretty now?" If you scream or say no, she'll cut you down. If you say yes, she gives you a smile to match hers. Now, for decades, this story spread through Japan in a mix of fear, fascination, and moral warning. For parents, they would say that she punished vanity, and kids dared each other to say her name, and every schoolyard had someone who swore they saw her. A woman in red, hiding her face, watching from across the street. Kinda reminds me of Bloody Mary. You would go into your bathroom, turn off the lights, and say her name 3 times. Apparently, she's supposed to appear. Kids would swap the story of an Onryo armed with scissors in the streets, but teachers brushed it off until 1979. The legend broke loose from the playground. That spring, real panic gripped Japan. Newspapers reported sightings of a woman in a red coat stalking schoolchildren. Police received dozens of calls. Parents formed escort patrols to walk their kids home, and teachers dismissed afternoon classes early because no one wanted to be out after dark. And then it happened in Himeji City, and officers arrested a 25-year-old woman wearing, you guessed it, a white mask and carrying a knife. She had been jumping out from alleys to scare children, pretending to be Kochisake Onna. Nobody was hurt, thankfully, but that didn't matter. The fear had already gone nationwide. The Slit-Mouthed Woman wasn't a ghost anymore. She had become a real public safety problem. Japan's National Police Agency even issued bulletins to calm citizens down. But here's the weirdest part. When police interrogated the woman, she said she didn't mean to cause chaos, she just wanted to see if people would scream. And they did. Millions of them. And the legend evolved after that. In the 1980s, it spread to Korea. In the 2000s, it resurfaced online with cell phone photos, fake security footage, and new rules. Like, if you were to say average instead of yes or no, then she would let you live. I mean, that's like classic internet urban legend feel, right? But unlike a lot of those urban legends, this one too has an official arrest record. A woman who literally turned myth into misdemeanor. This kind of urban legend is the kind of case that shows how thin the line between imagination and panic really is. All it takes is one person in a mask and a community ready to believe. So yeah, ghosts might not be real, but sometimes people do the haunting for them. Our next story probably is the most mundane, but also the most horrifying, because this one doesn't happen in the woods or at midnight or even under a bridge. It happens in your bed, the one that you're sleeping on, and it could happen to any one of us at any time. But I want to ask you one simple question. Have you ever actually found a dead body inside a hotel bed? Our story begins in Las Vegas, where a couple checks into their hotel room and instantly notices a strange smell. Something sour. They call the front desk, who sends up a cleaning crew armed with spray bottles and Pine Sol, and after an hour of scrubbing, the smell is not gone. It's worse, but now it has citrus undertones. The guests are pissed, but the hotel is full because there's a convention in town, and there are no other rooms available, so the couple decides to tough it out for one night. But at 3 a.m., that stench becomes unbearable. It wakes them up, and they can't take it anymore. They pack up, check out, and sleep in their car. And the next morning, housekeeping gets new orders. Find that smell. They strip the sheets, flip the mattress, and there's nothing. Finally, one cleaner decides to check inside the box spring. Something that I'm sure no one ever does. And there it was. Stuffed in a hollowed-out cavity is this rotting corpse. By the looks of it, it had been decomposing under guests for days. Multiple people had slept right on top of it. And that's the story. And it's been told the same way for decades. But is it real? Like most urban legends, the detail shifts depending on who's telling it. Sometimes it's Vegas, sometimes it's Florida, sometimes it's a motel off the interstate. It's always a couple or a family because that makes it grosser, and it's always a high-demand room that can't be swapped out, so you, dear traveler, have no choice but to sleep with death. The body is always hidden in the bed, not under it, because audiences will believe a lot of things, but not that someone ignored a smell that strong for 3 days without checking below. And that's the genius of the legend. It invites you to imagine how many strangers have done the same thing, and maybe even you too. I've slept in my fair share of stinky motel and hotels. I've always checked under the bed, but never in the box spring. And this urban legend even crept into pop culture in 1977's Deathbed, the bed that eats. The mattress is the one that does the killing. And in 1995's 4 Rooms, a kid notices a disgusting smell and finds a body inside the bed. But here's the punchline, those movies came after it started happening in real life. So let's start with 1988, Manola, New York. Guests at the Oceanside Motel complain about a foul smell. The body of Mary D. Oliveira, age 29, is found stuffed into the box spring. Her killer, Cornelius Walls, was later arrested for murder and kidnapping. By the time she was discovered, several guests had already slept in that bed. And then came the copies. In 1989 Virginia, a killer named Jerry Lee Dunbar hid 2 of his victims under motel beds, both discovered only after guests complained about the stench. 1994 Florida, 2 separate cases, 2 different hotels, both discovered only when guests complained about a terrible odor. 1996, a woman found under a Travelodge mattress. 1999, Atlantic City, the decomposing body of Sal Hernandez, found inside the bed of a Burgundy Motor Inn. In 2003, Kansas City, a guest stayed 4 nights before demanding that the staff check the smell, and they find a man's body stuffed into the box spring. 2010, Memphis, the body of Sony Millbrook, missing for 6 weeks, is found inside a hotel bed frame. The room had been cleaned and rented 5 more times while she was still inside. In almost every retelling of the story, people say it happened in Las Vegas, Sin City, but none of the actual cases happened there. That's just how urban legends work. We relocate the horror somewhere we expect bad things to happen, and it's easier to believe a corpse was found in a Vegas motel than to admit that it couldn't have been at a Comfort Inn off your own highway exit. Both are equally creepy though. Bodies have been hidden in and under beds since at least the 1980s. Every time it happens, the story mutates. The details change, the city changes, but the moral stays the same. Sometimes the scariest part isn't that it happened once, it's that it keeps happening. So the next time you check into a room that smells a little off, maybe don't assume it's the carpet cleaner, because when it comes to this legend, the truth has always been right under the bed. 5 stories, 5 urban legends, and every single one turned out to be, at least in part, true. A missing child blamed on a monster under the hospital. A man in a bunny suit with an axe. A Haitian villager who died and then came back. A ghost with scissors who walked the streets of Japan. And a corpse in a bed that strangers actually slept on. Different countries, different fears, same moral. The stories we invent to make sense of our nightmares usually come from something real. And that's what urban legends really are, right? They're not lies, but memories dressed up in superstition. They're society's way of warning us, coping with us, or just laughing at the things that keep us up at night. Cropsey reminded parents that monsters can live next door. The Bunny Man whispered that progress can drive people mad. The Haitian zombie asked what happens when science catches up to the soul. And the Slit-Mouthed Woman showed how fast fear spreads when everybody's already scared. And the body in the bed? Well, that one reminds us that there's no safe place, not even the comfort of your own sheets. We tell these stories because deep down, we want to believe evil is separate from us, that it's happening in the woods, behind the mask, under the mattress. And the truth is, most of the time it's human, and it's us. So next time you hear a rumor that sounds a bit too ridiculous to be true, or you read a headline that feels ripped from a horror script, remember that every legend starts with a moment someone swore was just a story. Until next time, check the closets, lock your doors, and maybe, just maybe, lift the mattress. As always, thank you for watching, and if you want to hear more of history's mysteries or life's disturbing discoveries, leave it down in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!
You shouldn't have looked. It's too